All eyes were on developers John Carmack, John Romero, Tom Willits, Tom Willits, Tom Willits, Tom Willits, Tom Willits. Okay, you've got this, Ranger. You got this. The man's name is Tim Willits. Tim. Okay, I got this. Let's go. Everyone loves this game. Both John Carmack and Tom Willits. Tim! Fuck! $1999 was a hell of a year for entertaining media, kids. The Matrix, The Mummy, Star Wars Episode 1, Unreal Tournament, Age of Empires 2, System Shock 2, and of course, closing out the year, being released on December 2nd, 1999, Quake III Arena. There was a lot riding on this installment of the series, particularly due to the successes of id Software's previous game, Quake II, and a little first-person shooter called Half-Life that had released the year before, 1998. Half-Life changed the notions of what FPS games could be at the time, with a heavy lean on cinematic set pieces and storytelling and intelligence versus fast-paced, guns-out gameplay. I sometimes hate using the word cinematic because if you think about it, anything can be cinematic. Cinema is an outdated and archaic term primarily utilized by outdated and archaic old men who have made and continue to make excellent films, but whose narrow viewpoint of what is or isn't cinema with a capital C just adds to the old man yelling at clouds meme. Fast-paced, action-oriented films can be just as impactful and as beautiful as art house cinema, something that, God, I can't believe I'm saying this. Flicks like The Fast and the Furious have more than proven. All it takes is a dedication and a passion to the presentation, and glorious garbage B-movie fun can be elevated to something resonating with audiences worldwide. The success of Half-Life was a double-edged sword. Sure, it got wider gaming audiences and mass media to take notice of a genre that was primarily known for machismo and wanton acts of violence, and to actually take it seriously as a vehicle for compelling stories. But it also opened up a direction for first-person shooters to eventually leave an entire genre behind, moving shooters further and further into the, quote, cinematic, unquote, realm, while leaving behind the adrenaline-fueled glory days of corridor crawling and arena action. Enter id Software with their final in-house entry into the Quake franchise, entirely ditching the single-player campaign altogether in favor of beautiful, blazing, bombastic multiplayer deathmatching, which was a big fucking deal at the time because id was known for their campaigns just as much as they were known for inventing deathmatch. Imagine a Call of Duty game coming out today that focused entirely on a campaign experience and had no multiplayer aspect to it. Fan reaction would be insane. Of course, if a Call of Duty managed to pull a Quake 3 and deliver something so solid and smooth and fun to play that it was still being played 21 years later, then I don't think the fans would mind. The way Tim Willits says it, John Carmack initially wanted to have a perpetual world in the game where players would battle each other to earn the favor of their respective elder gods that they served. That, as you can imagine, was scrapped in favor of a series of deathmatch arenas that would be suitable for free-for-all matches, team deathmatch, and capture the flag. Everything here is slick, polished, whittled down to the absolute essentials, and nothing more. But the production values, impressive aesthetics, and the laser-sharp gameplay elevate Quake 3 above and beyond a simple online arena shooter and into the realm of the bona fide classics. Sure, there was a massive risk involved. At the time, a little game known as Unreal Tournament had come out only a few months prior, also an online arena shooter, and had sold gangbusters while showing off some fancy new tech that didn't require a 3D accelerator card to run smoothly. With this in mind, Carmack was adamant about Quake 3 requiring a graphics card to run, staring Epic Games in the eye and saying, "No, you move." Fortune favors the bold, they say, and Carmack's boldness paid off. Quake 3 sold over 50,000 copies within its first 3 days. And not only that, it released to rave reviews across the board. To this day, Unreal Tournament and Quake 3 are compared and contrasted, many on both sides arguing which game is better. But is Quake 3 still worth playing today. I mean, we're talking about an online boomer shooter that's legally old enough to drink, one with no single-player campaign. So how do we go about playing this in the year of our Lord John Romero 2021? Well, kids, the answer to that is a lot simpler than you think. So hold on tight and let's see if this baby still purrs. To start off with, I went and downloaded the EDON Quake 1.32e patch to get the game working on my more modern computer, because otherwise, good luck getting a good resolution off of the base game. Game runs so smooth and the graphics are so beautiful. It's funny, playing Quake 3 now with the right upgrades doesn't make it look any better than it once did, but instead it makes it look exactly like how I remember it when I was a teenager. Just as crisp and detailed, and the lighting effects are still just as impressive. That's a rare feat to dive back into a game from a couple of decades back and have it look just as good as you picture it in your mind's eye. The Quake 3 engine, or rather id Tech 3, is a technological marvel that people are still scratching their heads over today, partly due to something called a fast inverse square root algorithm for rendering light effects, which I started to look into, and then remembered that I flunked math in high school, so I wouldn't be able to explain it to you even if I pretended that I understood. Kids, look at this game. Look at this game. The hyper-detailed textures, the character model animations, the architecture and the map design, and the game moves fast too, lightning fast. Even back in the ancient times, it just zipped around. You know, I remember playing all of id's games, and I remember that at any given point in time, each of them stuttered in one way or another and gave me frame rate issues at various times, but Quake 3 would never. Not even in the most ungainly packed skirmish arenas I could muster, Quake 3 never once slows, stutters, or falters. Quake 3 is a Ferrari, a roaring panther of swiftness and power that defies all expectations of code and algorithm. Thanks, John! Looks aren't everything, though. Quake 3 couples of prettiness with smooth, responsive handling and controls that still to this day baffle me with how intuitive they are. I did a back and forth comparison between Quake 3 and Quake Champions, and while admittedly Champions felt better than I expected it to, there's a noticeable difference in handling and balance of movement. Champions' characters feel a lot heavier, restricted more by gravity, anchored to the environment, where Quake 3 movement is much more fluid and light, while balanced perfectly with inertia in walking and running and bunny hopping. There's a lot of passion under the hood here. I mentioned before that Quake 2 felt devoid of personality, of passion, that it felt like a well-made shooter in game feel, but that otherwise was slower and lifeless. And then we got Quake 3 and shit howdy, the personality is leaping off of the screen. We've got a surprisingly deft combination of Quake 1 and 2's production values here, along with the satanic staples that id is known for. Strange, eldritch atmospherics, militaristic sci-fi futurism, blasphemous imagery. Quake 3 runs the gamut across the breadth of id's catalog and brings together the best visual aspects of all their previous games into one wild series of arenas that always somehow feel fresh despite being so very distinct from one another. And this is in due part to the fact that even though it doesn't have a traditional campaign, Quake 3 actually does have a story, and it is fucking banana bonkers. The game has an opening cutscene featuring what's as close to a main character as Quake 3 gets. The Sarge, running out of ammo and diving headfirst into a hopeless battle, only to be teleported away in the midst of it. Cue the soundtrack from Sonic Mayhem and Frontline Assembly and some gameplay footage, and we're in the main menu ready to frag. Simple enough setup, no muss, no fuss, and it gives us enough context to not blink when we see the Ranger from Quake, as well as Bitterman from Quake 2, and Doom Guy from Doom, amongst the roster of fighters that the game lets the player choose from to play as. See, once upon a time, a multi-dimensional race called the Vadragar decided they were so bored that they needed entertainment in the form of champions killing each other for their amusement. Of course, death is kind of a permanent thing, so they created a dimension where death and time were suspended, meaning whatever warriors they captured and dragged into this arena eternal, as it's called, wouldn't cease to live just because their bodies expired. Getting fragged means reappearing instantly, so these warriors would compete against each other for high scores. I do love that the game has an explanation for how players respawn built into the lore. That's fucking amazing. But, as has been explained in both Arena and Champions lore, the Arena Eternal exists outside of time. So therefore, the warriors they pull into the arena are pulled from various points in their own timelines. Sometimes, as in this case, out of order. So, let's take a look here. Okay, so Saber Interactive, developers of Quake Champions, have confirmed that Champions takes place before Quake 3 Arena does, meaning that the version of Ranger we see here in Arena is older than the Ranger in Champions. Same Ranger, by the way, meaning Ranger in Champions is fresh off of the fight in Quake 1, and the Ranger in Arena is described in the manual as more alien than human now. So we can infer that he's been stuck here for a long fucking time. Meanwhile, Bitterman looks decidedly less human than we can assume he did in Quake 2, as his bio states that he was subjected to strongification, but managed to get out and maintain his humanity despite the conversion, which is a really interesting plot point considering the exact same thing happens in Quake 4. But that's a different soldier in that game, so... Meanwhile, Doom Guy here appears to be hot off the Doom 2 train, wearing his outfit from Doom 1 and 2. And since Doom 64 wasn't canon at this point in time, we can assume Doom Guy was plucked out of the ether and into the arena at some point after Doom 2. Then again, his biography mentions he kept fighting on Phobos long after everyone was killed, so it could be that he was picked up after Doom 64 events. He just has classic Doom armor. Regardless, it needs to be noted that Doom Guy here is pre-Doom Slayer status. So Doom Slayer being in Champions means that the Slayer probably got plucked out of the timeline at some point before he was shoved into the coffin. So Quake III Arena takes place after Quake Champions, but Arena Ranger is older than Champions Ranger, and Arena Doom Guy is pre-Slayer, and the Slayer shows up in Champions, and he was probably put in before Doom 2016. You kids got all that? Because I've got a migraine now, so I'm feeling the need to move on. Since the internet back in 1999 was still mostly running on dial-up modems, Jesus fuck, God, I hate that. Stop, somebody please. Id wisely included bots for the player to fight against when they weren't searching for battles online. And while there's still a thriving community online of people playing Quake 3 Deathmatch, it's not exactly easy to find a good match, so we're going to take a look at what passes for the single-player components here. Essentially, players are tasked with climbing the ranks of the arena by facing computer-controlled bots across the 35 maps that the game offers in 7 different tiers of difficulty. Each tier has its own motley crew of bots to face off against, except for the final tier where you face off against the absolute master of the arena, a guy named Zero, who we will talk about later because I'm still suffering a little PTSD from that fight right now. Single player opens up with tier 0, the training tier, and once you've conquered the training bot, you've unlocked tier 1, which consists of 4 maps. Each tier consists of 4 maps, actually, except for the final tier. That's just you and Zero. You'll have to step in and beat each deathmatch in the tier to unlock the next one, so there's no moving upwards unless you actually prove yourself in the arena, which is a subtle but nice touch. All you have to do is pick a tier, select a map, select a difficulty, and then get to fragging. Some of these levels are fucking kick-ass, with some of id's best map names to date. The Place of Many Deaths, Temple of Retribution, The Proving Grounds, Hellgate, Heroes Keep, The Longest Yard, Apocalypse Void. Pretty much all of these maps are stellar to play on too, with 1 or 2 exceptions. A couple of times I felt like I was meandering around large maps doing nothing for minutes at a time because there were only 3 bots to face off against in this huge twisty arena, so it took forever to rack up enough kills to win the match. One map in particular was filled with nothing but bounce pads and like, come on, id. The bounce pads were a neat addition to the series, to id games in general, but sometimes you gotta know when enough is enough, am I right? Otherwise, these are absolute staples in the congregate of deathmatch maps. If you're a longtime Quake fan, the moment I said The Longest Yard a moment ago, you already could feel the rail shots whiff past you while hearing the sounds of rockets thundering all around, airborne for seconds at a time while running for cover. The Longest Yard is the final destination of deathmatch maps. It is the gold standard for deathmatch in every single way possible. There's a lot going on with each of these maps, with hidden secrets and bounce pads to superpowered items, as well as strategically placed weapons and even booby traps. Some of these maps are designed for strict one-on-one battles against some of the so-called arena lords that essentially make up the single player's mini-bosses. And let me tell you kids, on the higher difficulty levels, that bot AI is no fucking joke, especially in one-on-one duels. Each of Quake 3's bots have a personality of their own, consisting of how aggressive they are, what kind of weapons they prefer, when they choose to move in close to choke you off, or strafe out in a way to tag you with long-range weapons. Each bot has individual lines of dialogue that they taunt you with throughout the match, and depending on what you type to them, they will respond in kind. And some of that dialogue was written by R.A. Salvatore. Yes, that R.A. Salvatore. Each character definitely has a specific vibe. Anytime I saw Orb on a map, I knew to track it down and stay on it, as it had the tendency to get aggressive real fast with explosive weaponry. Lucy and Keel, too. They were tough little fuckers who liked to charge in headfirst with shotguns and rocket launchers and leave no one standing. You get a sense real fast of who is more aggressive and who is less, who to watch out for and who to get easy kills on. Remarkably, playing against Quake 3's bots sometimes feels like facing down human players, albeit not as unpredictable. One of my favorite fights in the game is on the map Fatal Instinct against Uriel, a map that is covered in a thick orange fog and difficult to get a beat on anything. Uriel kept launching rockets through the fog, testing corners, hoping to tag me. Bots can and will listen for your footsteps as well as your weapon fire, which just, it's eerie, and I hate it, but I love it at the same time. Every shooter is only as good as the weapons you get to shoot, and here Quake 3 is no slouch. Where the character roster pulls from the best of its past, the arsenal does the same. The machine gun is a fairly weak but reliable default weapon that can and will kill what's in front of you if you can dodge incoming fire fast enough and from a distance to boot. The shotgun is a standard double barrel that will do surprisingly decent damage at a distance from the spread, something which is aided by the fact that it's a hit scan. The rocket launcher here is all reliable, with fast projectiles that deal sufficient splash damage. Rocket dueling in this game is intense and adrenaline pumping. The lightning gun makes a return from Quake 1, another favorite of mine. Just point, click, and hold steady and you'll rip through opponents like tissue paper. The railgun returns from Quake 2, something that is better from a distance sniping others, but oh baby, when it hits hard and can make the difference in a strained battle. The plasma gun from Doom 2 got an upgrade, with projectile shots that have a tiny amount of splash damage, so you can aim for the feet and still do significant damage. There's a grenade launcher which, well, it sucks. That's about all I got for that. And then, fuck me, some of the maps have a BFG 10K, and what a difference this gun makes. Some people look at this specific iteration of the BFG and complain because it's not the one-shot force of destruction that appears in id's other games. But man, there is something intimidating about a rapid-fire BFG. The shots don't do as much as they do in other iterations, but it's the single most powerful gun in the goddamn game, and if you've got one in your hands, you're not going to turn your nose up at it. You're going to frag everything in the goddamn room until someone else gets the better of you. There's some great power-ups that genuinely keep some of the matches interesting, such as the standard quad damage power-up, the regeneration power-up, the battle shield, the invisibility power. A cool bit is that some of them appear in specific spots in the single-player maps, while not showing up in the multiplayer maps. A bit of an odd choice, but it does switch things up a bit, so that if you're practicing on single-player skirmishes, you'll have to think a little quicker in online deathmatch so that you're not just relying on superpowers. There's honestly a decent challenge here in the single-player trials. I played through the game on hardcore difficulty, which is the ultra-violence equivalent, and got through the first 6 tiers by the skin of my teeth sometimes. Seriously, the deficit I faced on a couple of maps was intimidating to say the least. These bots really don't fuck around, but none of them compare to Zero. Zero is, and I absolutely stress this, the worst fucking bot on the worst fucking map of the entire game. The name of the map is The Very End of You. 2 floating platforms over an abyss of black which you can bounce across, or you can bounce up to the platform above that houses the BFG. Now, mind you, I had just finished playing through the whole rest of the game on hardcore, so walking into this, understanding that there was this big build up to Zero being a massive badass, I thought I was ready. Thought, kids. Thought. Now, listen wisely. Go bust out your copy of Quake 3 and go play this map. Go play Zero. Because what you're about to see doesn't do nearly as much justice as feeling it does.
Zero. You have lost the lead.
This fucking sucks. First off, Zero's AI is unholy. On hardcore, he can tag you from literally anywhere with the railgun. Accurate in the air, on the ground, flipping backwards, whatever. He can and will hit you with the railgun if he has one. Second, attempting to leap between platforms only opens you up to getting hit, which either kills you or knocks you off course midair so you fall off into the void, taking away any points you may or may not have. I spent multiple rounds in the negative because Zero kept shooting me off of the arena just as easily as he was fragging me. Third, that BFG is a red herring because there's a target floating next to the platform which, when shot, will cause the platform to crush anything inside of it. So, if you manage to leap across the arena without being fragged midair or being knocked into the void, there's a very strong chance Zero is going to hit that target and crush you the moment you snag the BFG, counting as a suicide and removing a point from your score. I don't know how long I spent on this challenge. I couldn't do it. I thought there was something wrong with me or the game. I couldn't do it. I lowered the difficulty down by a notch, thinking that would work. But no, it didn't. It just made it so that Zero would miss every other shot. This map is a fucking awful piece of shit. Rockets and railguns and the BFG are your only weapons. Bouncing through the air is your only travel, and the trap of the BFG is a goddamn tease. Every step forward and every frag you score will be knocked back and knocked down by getting knocked out of the arena so fucking fast. And Zero? Sometimes he'll come hunting for you by leaping over to your platform and he'll try to weave around the cover and get to you. And if you take his health down just enough, he will, 9 times out of 10, try to back off over the edge and suicide so that you can't get the point off of him. Losing a point on his end doesn't really matter because he'll just pop off a railgun shot moments later and get that point right back. What an unfortunate turn of events, because up till this point, I felt like I had faced a steady rise in difficulty throughout the tiers, but nothing vastly as unfair as this. Zero is on another level, an aimbot gunning right for your head on a map that leaves you exposed more often than not. Fuck me, whoever made this level must have been hurt by someone in their past, like really, really bad, like left at the altar kind of hurt, like daddy walking out on you kind of hurt, like pooped your pants in the middle of high school math class kind of hurt. Either that, or whoever made this map is just a huge fucking dick.
So the origins of that map was a bet. It was a QA guy that came down from Activision. So he came down and I said, I could make a map from start to finish in under an hour. So I made that map in about 50 minutes.
Wow, okay. Tom Willits is a dick. Okay, cool, fuck this. I'm just going to... Yeah, fuck this shit. You don't deserve my sweat. Anyways, beat Zero. Get a super short cutscene showing him ascending or something now that he's no longer the greatest arena champion ever. Roll credits. And that's Quake 3's campaign. And you know what? I do like it. I still think it's a vicarious fun time to be had, especially as all these bots display serious personality and tenacity and are genuinely a great run of practice to get into deathmatch against humans. I really felt like my skills increased across the board, and I'm looking forward to maybe doing a nightmare run through the tiers. And yes, I'm still practicing on Zero. I managed to beat him on Hurt Me Plenty at the very least. So you finish single player and you're hoping for more. What is there? Well, the single-player mode also has a skirmish option, so instead of going through the preset death matches in each tier, you can select a map, select a bunch of bots to face off against, set a time limit or a frag limit, pick the individual bots, pick the difficulty, and have a goddamn great time. I'll tell you, kiddies, for the longest time, when my internet wasn't the greatest, I lost hours to skirmish rounds on the Proving Grounds, which is probably my favorite map in the whole game. There's nothing quite like loading up a bunch of fodder and going to town on them, or putting in the beefiest bots you can and seeing just how well you can sustain yourself while staring down their sights. It's a humbling experience to load up 10 bots and watch as their frag counts rise higher while yours is barely able to keep up. You can skirmish mode on any map, making it even more insane when you put 15 bots into a map designed for one-on-one matches. But I want to play this game the way it was meant to be played. I hear you shouting at me from your room where you've been grounded the last couple of days because you told me you liked Unreal more than Doom. Well, you're in luck. Once I let you out, you can still in fact play online deathmatch. I'm serious, you can just boot the game and find a server and let her rip. Now, granted, you might have to do a little scavenging through the lists. I ended up popping in and out of a couple of servers where there were like 10 or 20 spectators while 1 or 2 bots were running around, and I couldn't fathom why anyone would do that. But I digress. I did manage to hop into a couple of lovely rounds where I locked horns with a couple players named Unnamed Player and Cum Slut. Quake 3 is still very playable online with a large number of servers to choose from. Some of them might be modded and not all of them might have people actually playing, but you know what? It's just dandy to know that I can still hop in and do some damage in Quake 3 online the way it was meant to be. Trying to get your own server up and running though, well, that takes a special kind of magic and commitment that after all these years, I'm still damned if I can figure out how to do. I tried hosting a game and setting up a server and nobody jumped into it. I tried again while playing with Gaming Uncle Pancake Detective and he couldn't find it or even search for it. Eventually we gave up and decided to hop into a server already established so that we could deathmatch, which was fine and all, but everyone in the game was just spectating. There were a couple of Joes who jumped in and did some deathmatch eventually, but I sure wouldn't mind a bit of an easier way to set up a basic server to play on. 'Cause kids, Quake 3 is still a hell of a lot of fun to play online, and you deserve to play it the way it was meant to be. I've established a Ranger room on Discord that you can all join and shitpost in and connect to play some Quake every now and again. But outside of figuring out the Goblet of Fire, it'll be about finding a server already in place and then everyone jumping into it, which kind of sounds like a makeshift invasion mode, which, you know what? That's actually pretty awesome. And I would be stunningly remiss if I didn't talk about the soundtrack, which as I mentioned earlier features returning composer Sonic Mayhem collaborating with Frontline Assembly. It's a pretty neat mixture that we've got on our hands, with a wide variety of grinding guitars sampled into drum and bass early 2000s rave club Matrix music that somehow perfectly captures the pacing and the environments the game has to offer. Considering that the different arenas contain both satanic and sci-fi elements, the in-game music capturing those stark elements seems like a cliched affair. But while playing, I was reminded of some of the best aspects of Nine Inch Nails' original Quake compositions and my favorite pieces Sonic Mayhem made for Quake 2. What's great about this is that the music doesn't simply rely on pedal to the floor, high BPM heavy metal techno, and it wisely knows when to slow the beat down to craft a truly tense atmosphere. Put on some headphones and enjoy these tunes. So, at the end of the day, is Quake 3 Arena really everyone's favorite? Well, it's hard to argue that. Me, my personal favorite is Quake 1, while many stand behind Quake 2 as the best. But it's really hard to argue against Quake 3 being the gold standard for the series. It combines the aesthetics and attitudes of the previous two games, as well as ideology from id's entire catalog. It's as refined shooters get, stripped down to the bare minimum and polished from the ground up to create a swift, seductive, sensational shooter that is all killer and no filler. It even has a deep backstory that opens up multiple possibilities for future installments, with a single-player component that goes harder than it really needs to. Yes, Quake 3 stumbles in some aspects, with a few maps that could have been tighter and a final boss that just screams bullshit from the rooftops, but overall, Quake 3 is one of the best shooters of all time in one of the best franchises of all time, and it struts with the confidence of a pro that understands how good it is, but never stops to look back and admire itself. Quake 3 more than holds up by today's standards and demands a playthrough, even if it's just for the single player and the skirmish mode. But yes, there is still a dedicated multiplayer community that, while a little dense, will still find room for you to deathmatch like it's 1999. I'm going to give Quake 3 Arena an 8.5 out of 10. Kids, wow, I can't believe I've done 3 videos on the Quake games. You know, when I did the Quake 25th anniversary video, I didn't think it would blow up and lead to covering the entire trilogy, but here we are. I'm not sure if I'm going to do the enhanced remaster of Quake that recently came out. I mean, I certainly would, but I want to cover the whole game, mission packs included. And doing a review of Quake Champions just doesn't feel like a review-worthy video. That's just one for Let's Plays. I actually did it. I've gone and reviewed the whole Quake main series. I guess I can just sit back and relax and go about my business. What? Hey, who's there? Show yourself. Oh my god, no, we talked about this. You said you understood. I said I wouldn't get a restraining order if you just kept your distance. You're not supposed to be here. You can't just show up and try to come back into my life. Alright, you're not going to leave until you get what you want. I guess there's only one way to handle this.